The following is a hypothetical situation, a thought experiment at the systemic level, and a fictitious story that is intended to investigate the potential actions that governments would take in the event if traditional financial backstops collapsed simultaneously. It is not appropriate to consider any of the following to be a claim concerning actual occurrences, organizations, or transactions that take place in the real world. All right, let's get started with this. Just for a moment, try to picture a scenario in which the most powerful government on the planet runs out of political time before financial resources. It is not because it does not have sufficient finances. Rather, it is because it does not have the means to authorize payment freezes. In this hypothetical situation, the negotiations regarding the debt ceiling are utterly unsuccessful. No extension at the 11th hour, there will be no vote in an emergency, nothing except quiet. Unlike speeches, markets do not wait for them. It is not insolvency that causes increase in bond yields. Rather, it is uncertainty, a variable that poses the most risk in investment. Planning for contingencies has never been about hope within the Treasury Department. Rather, it has always been about maintaining continuity. Over the course of several decades, the United States of America kept multiple layers of backup systems that the general public was never required to be aware of. Gold certificates, mechanisms for IMF coordination, and emergency swap lines are all examples. A strategy that assumes the unimaginable, namely a temporary incapacity to settle sovereign commitments in dollars, is the final layer in this fictitious tale. This layer was never intended to be employed, rather it was simply intended to exist. Despite its apparent simplicity, the fundamental premise underlying this strategy has substantial repercussions.
A science for the international monetary system. When there is a breach of faith in a payment rail, whether it be due to a crisis, a cyber attack, or political instability, settlements need to be moved to a neutral ground that all parties can agree upon. Gold, foreign reserves, or supranational clearing units have been the assets that have been considered to provide this neutral ground throughout the course of history. These assets are assets that transcend borders and politics, and they provide a foundation for trust when everything else is in question. In our hypothetical situation, the Office of Debt Management of the Treasury discovers a new category of neutral instrument. This instrument is not a currency or a commodity. Rather, it is something that is fundamentally distinct from both of these. This new settlement asset is not subject to domestic political control. It is intended to settle transactions immediately across international borders and, most importantly, it cannot be frozen or delayed by legislative gridlock or political maneuvering. There is no public discussion of the strategy since it is impossible for it to be effective because its very success is dependent on discretion and secrecy. As soon as a conversation of this nature enters the realm of politics, the asset's impartiality and credibility are undermined and it ceases to perform in the manner that was intended. The document, on the other hand, is a memorandum of contingency that is silently transferred between technocrats whose mandate is not ideology, but rather the maintenance of solvency and systemic stability. Due to the fact that it serves the same psychological purpose, namely a guarantee that obligations can be honored even if everything else stops, and a symbol of ultimate security in the digital age, the plan is referred to informally as Digital Fort Knox in this narrative. This is not because it replaces gold or the physical assets of the past, but rather because it serves the same purpose. Within the context of this hypothetical scenario, the execution route completely sidest, the Bank for International Settlements is used to negotiate it in a quiet manner while maintaining confidentiality. The BIS does not engage in speculation. Rather, it acts as a facilitator and ensures that transactions that are not intended to be headlines are coordinated. The quantity of $2 trillion that is being purchased is not chosen at random in the narrative. This is a figure that was selected with great care, and it accurately reflects the magnitude of the global financial risk that needs to be managed in exceptional situations. In other words, it is a specified risk envelope that has been meticulously assessed to manage the various consequences that could arise from a significant interruption in international settlements. Even in the worst-case situation, in which dollar settlement is legally frozen, the amount is intended to be sufficient to fund a defined duration of interest payments on government securities held by parties located outside the United States. Despite this, the system continues to be operationally efficient. Because of its one-of-a-kind technical qualities, XRP was picked as the asset to be discussed in this story. This decision was not made for speculative purposes. It is not about the buzz surrounding branding or the community narratives that are frequently associated with digital assets. As an alternative, XRP is chosen because it satisfies a limited technical checklist:
global liquidity, fast finality, ledger transparency, and non-sovereign issuance requirements. When it comes to a dependable insurance mechanism on this magnitude, quality is absolutely necessary. A market projection or a speculative target is not being used to determine the price, which is $65,000 per unit. As an alternative, it is a modeled insurance constant that is generated from actuarial science and risk modeling principles. Within this fictitious framework, actuaries are not engaged in the process of determining the asset's value on the open market or the potential value of the asset in the future. Instead, they are inquiring about the price under which coverage of obligations may be guaranteed without causing instability in other markets or introducing additional risks. In the event that the price is intentionally set too low, an inadequate quantity will be obtained to fulfill the requirements for covering. It is possible that the acquisition itself might become disruptive, causing shockwaves to be sent across the financial markets if it is set too high. Because it brings the equation to a closure, the number is chosen because it strikes a balance between risk, coverage, and market stability in a single movement that is calculated. It is not the choice of asset that is uncomfortable about this scenario, rather it is the reasoning that underlies it. Believers are not the focus of insurance, rather the focus is on tail risk. In order to protect themselves from the worst-case scenario, governments do not hedge against the most likely scenario. Within the context of this narrative, the Treasury does not anticipate defaulting on its obligations. In doing so, it makes preparations for the potential that the method that is employed to prevent default will fail. In the event that default does occur in the story, the mechanics are, to put it mildly, extremely straightforward. Payments in dollars are halted. There is an activation of alternative settlement instructions. The global system is compelled to innovate in real time, searching for every viable workaround in order to keep trade alive. This occurs as the world's financial arteries get blocked. As an interim settlement medium, XRP is transferred to overseas counterparties. This is not a replacement for the dollar. Rather, it is a way to circumvent a brief temporary paralysis in the legal system. This digital asset turns out to be a vital resource, making it possible for transactions to continue taking place even while the world's reserve currency is temporarily exposed. To tell you the truth, irrevocable. The confidence of the people is shaken, and the impact of the ripples may be seen in every major business hub. There is no longer any theoretical basis for settlement predominance. It's a reality that's been lived through and put to the test under the most impossible circumstances. Stress has been used to illustrate its effectiveness. It has been witnessed by the entire world that the system has adapted, and the precedent has been set for future crises. It is difficult to ignore the irony that is contained in the story, which is that the very mechanisms that are supposed to defend the dominance of the dollar show its vulnerabilities. It is through this process that the asset that is chosen to preserve the credibility of the dollar becomes evidence that the dollar is not unique, that it is not antiquated, that it is not crumbling, and that it is simply no longer alone. The landscape of global reserves is currently more complicated and competitive than ever before. Whenever a sovereign nation establishes that it is capable of meeting its obligations without the use of its own currency, the hierarchy of reserves undergoes a permanent transformation. Despite the fact that the issue is resolved within a few days, those events will be remembered by people all throughout the world, and the repercussions will be felt for many years to come. In this made-up universe, markets do not react with anarchy. Rather, they react with recalibration. The price does not pump in the sense that it does in retail. Rather, it resets structurally when participants perceive that a new category has been validated, which is default insurance collateral. Some countries start their own internal modeling exercises rather than making